once the countdown has been resumed. So sit tight, don't go away. We'll be right back when the countdown resumes.
À tous de DDO, suite au retour au vert de l'ensemble de lancement, le nouvel H0 visé est 21h56 TU. Le TD redémarrera à 21h49 TU. À tous de DDO, attention pour la séquence finale, lanceur. Top, page 0, moins 7 minutes, reprise du temps des comptes.
All right, you see we're back in business. We've gone from red.
À tous de DDO, le nouvel H0 visé est à 21h56 TU, soit 18h56 locales.
We've gone from red back to green. Whatever the problem was didn't hold us up for long. We're in the 7-minute mark again. This brings us into what is known as the automatic or the synchronized sequence, the final moments of the final countdown, a complex series of operations running right down to liftoff. Our stage is set. I'm going to go back to my broadcast booth while we're shifting the scenery. Take a look at a film on the launch campaign to see how Ariane 5 is readied for her mission.
The final phase of the launch campaign, which started on 18th of July, was the structural integration of the launcher, followed by the electrical and pneumatic checkout on the launcher integration building. After a technical exception, the launcher was transferred on its launch table to the final integration building on the 14th of August.
Intelsat 37e arrived in French Guiana with an Antonov plane in Cayenne-Félix-Éboué Airport. The satellite equipment was installed in the S5C North building to begin its preparation phase. Later on, the satellite was transferred to the fueling S5B building, where the Boeing team proceeded to the filling of the tanks. BSAT 4A arrived as well in French Guiana with an Antonov plane in Cayenne-Félix-Éboué Airport. BSAT 4A was installed in the S5C South building and began its preparation phase. The satellite was then transferred to the fueling S5A building, where the SSL team proceeded to the filling of the tanks. The combined operations between satellites and launcher began at day-11 with the Intelsat 37e mating on the flight adapter. Then transferred to the final assembly building, the satellite was integrated on top of the Silda and encapsulated by the fairing and Atlas mated on the upper part of the launch vehicle. On its side, BSAT 4A began the combined operations with launcher at day-9 in the S5A with flight adapter mating. After transfer to the BAF, BSAT 4A was mated on top of the launcher and covered by the upper composite.
The final preparations of the launcher for the flight, as well as the payload encapsulation and the integration of the launcher, were carried out. The pyrotechnic arming of the launcher was performed before the launch readiness review, which gave the authorization to transfer on the launch pad. Once the ground installations and the launcher are put into flight configuration, we shall conclude with the final chronology phase before liftoff. A special thank you goes to all the operational teams for their huge efforts and contribution to take us through this very smooth launch campaign so far.
Joshua Jampel back in the booth. Just a final word on the launch campaign to add to the film. Every campaign is special because the people involved change, of course, and with each campaign they're faced with special anomalies and requirements. For the rest, the procedures are pretty standard. Assembly of the launcher is pretty regular. The green status panels on the right, again, you just saw, we mentioned them briefly before, the real-time summary of all the launch activities here in the space base. And as you see, we're back to green. Some 1,700 people working around the space base in all. Our cameras are here in Jupiter, but many others busy at other sites. Another place that's very active is the launch zone, where the launch management teams are working under the direction of the launch operations manager, Klaus Zell, today you saw. Their day began at 7:30 this morning with their first operations. Right now, 2 teams working up there. One is responsible for the ground operations, the other for readiness of the Ariane 5. The launch site operations manager heads up one group. He coordinates with mission control for final authorization to launch. And when all the conditions are right, he then okays the automatic sequence at the 7-minute mark, which we saw. In all, about 100 people up there working launch control, going over the final checks and verification on all parts of Ariane's launch system. 2.5 minutes to go to launch of the 95th Ariane 5 mission. And here in Jupiter, the VIPs and the invited guests are very shortly going to begin to make their ways outside to watch the liftoff. There are 2 terraces on either side of the building that gives a fine view onto the launch pad. Ariane 5's flight path takes her right over Jupiter, and when the skies are clear, you get quite a sight. This split-screen image shows the propellant feeder arms in the middle of the launcher, liquid hydrogen on the left, liquid oxygen on the right. What are they doing? Well, they're putting propellant into the upper stage tanks, and you'll see these arms pull back at -7 seconds, 7 seconds before ignition. It's one of the last things you'll see, so we like to take a minute to mention it. And you see the yellow arms in the middle of the launch vehicle there extending from the gantry. The first weather check just before noon today local time gave the go-ahead to fill both the upper and lower stages with their liquid hydrogen and oxygen. A minute 20 seconds to go till the 9th launch of the year for Arianespace as we enter the final quarter of the year. Coming up in the last minute, and you'll hear the DDO call that out.
À tous de DDO, attention pour moins 1 minute.
1 minute mark, 60 seconds coming up.
Top H0 moins 1 minute.
So we're into the final moments of Final Countdown. Give us a chance to say hello to our friends at Intelsat in Washington, to our friends at BSAT in Tokyo, to the Boeing and SSL teams in Los Angeles and Palo Alto, California. Locally, to the Kourou, Sinnamary, and Cayenne sites, to our industrial partners, ESA and Kines, and to all of you following on the internet. We hope you're enjoying it. If you're not settled in, pull up a chair and enjoy the launch, because we are going to cut away and let you listen to the DDO as she calls out the final seconds. Watch for the cryogenic arms to open. That sets the ball rolling at -7 seconds.
À tous de DDO, attention pour les décomptes finales. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage Vulcain. Allumage des 2 EAP et décollage Ariane 239. Les paramètres à bord sont corrects.
And as the DDO calls out that all is working flawlessly on board, Ariane 5, right on time, begins her mission, lifting off with a lot of fire, as you saw, carrying her 2 new satellites. The 2 boosters are providing 90%, that's 90% of our thrust right now. The DDO saying all is fine on board. 776 tons is our weight, is our mass at liftoff, and to get that sort of mass off the ground, you need, of course, a lot of push. Ariane is burning 5 tons of fuel every second, 2.5 tons in each booster every second. And the core stage burning another 300 kilos of fuel per second. Ariane 5 now following the program on the onboard computer, which gives all the orders, including stage separations, which we're going to see in just a minute. We're in the first of 4 flight phases. We'll describe each in turn and in detail so you can follow Ariane as she heads across the Atlantic eastward. Right now, the first flight phase, as we watch these wonderful
La
pictures, very
propulsion
clear.
est correcte,
The
la
single
trajectoire est
first
nominale.
stage engine and the two boosters are burning. The boosters will each consume their 240 tons in just over 2 minutes. They are the first to be extinguished. You'll hear that from the DDO.
Le pilotage est calme.
This first flight phase using both cryogenic and storable propellant, a mix. Cryogenic propulsion offers certain advantages over storable propellant. Better, more precise performance. It can be turned off and on. Motors can function longer. Arianes 1, 2, 4 owe their success to storable propellant, not cryogenics. You see the points of light burning? Those are the boosters and the core stage. And very shortly you should be able to see the
Séparation des deux EAP, la trajectoire est nominale.
The DDO has confirmed extinction and separation of the boosters. There's the two orange points of light on either side, the boosters falling away. The white point of light in the middle is the core stage continuing to burn. The boosters will fall 500 kilometers from shore in a protected area. French Guiana chosen in part as a base for its opening on the ocean, on the Atlantic, launches posing no threat to local population. We'll have more on that a bit later on. The speed we need to inject a satellite is roughly 9 kilometers per second, 9,000 kilometers an hour. And you can see on the bottom right, our speed now is just over 2 kilometers per second. Our altitude is over on the left, over 100 kilometers up. We're getting close to separation of the fairing. There we are.
Séparation coiffe,
is given
à bord
by
normaux.
two pyrotechnic systems, one horizontal, one vertical, and you can see one half of the fairing falling away on the left, the other half out of camera range on the right. We can separate the fairing now, revealing Intelsat 37e to the elements. Why? Because we're out of the dense layers of the atmosphere, over 100 kilometers up, neither friction nor heating to disturb the passengers. We also discard any dead weight, so we can maximize the launcher's performance. Fairing weighs
La propulsion
2.5
est
tons.
nominale.
We mentioned earlier that the countdown was a complicated process and a long one. Final countdown actually began about 11 hours ago this morning. We here saw only the final moments. First checks of the electrical services, for example, began 10.5 hours ago. Filling of the lower stage began 4 hours ago with the liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen. Filling of the upper stage began 3 hours ago with the same.
La trajectoire est nominale.
Ariane 5 is the heavy lift launcher, remember, the two other members of the family, Soyuz, lifting middle-sized payloads, 2 and 3 tons, and Vega, the light lift vehicle for missions of roughly 1 ton. With its family of launch vehicles, Arianespace is the reference providing launches of any mass to any orbit at any time.
Le pilotage est calme.
Arianespace, part of Europe's
nominale.
space effort, which is a three-way affair among Arianespace, ESA, the European Space Agency, and the French National Space Agency, CNES. You find them all here, along with the customers. Arianespace in charge of operating the family of launchers and of marketing the launch services and the Ariane program. ESA funding new programs, and CNES overseeing coordination of all space-based operations. The Jupiter building, you're looking down into the fishbowl where the operational people are. Jupiter's in two parts. The invited guests and VIPs on one side, and the operational people there on the other. The Guyana Space Center, Europe's spaceport, certified ISO 14001 back in 2004, which means its activities meet the international environmental standards. This includes everything that goes on in the technical center, Jupiter where we are, and the payload preparation units, the test bench for the boosters, and all the rest.
Il reste 3 minutes de propulsion de l'étage à propulsion cryotechnique
Of the launch. And you can re-experience those beautiful moments, those beautiful shots. Here's your replay. As Ariane lifted off just about 6 minutes ago. This is the first of what we hope will be many replays. Seen from different locations, we have cameras at several of the half-dozen observation sites that are stationed across the base, and they furnish us with shots from different angles. Here's another. The closest observation site is called Toucan, like the bird, and that's where the VIPs usually are. Toucan is closest to the base.
La trajectoire est nominale, la propulsion est correcte.
As the DDO says everything is fine on board, we are in the second powered flight phase. The single-engine core stage is burning now. The boosters have done their work. All of Ariane's trajectory.
Il reste 2 minutes de propulsion de l'étage principal cryotechnique.
Watch a third replay. All of Ariane's trajectory has been designed, of course, to be followed from the ground. The launcher is sending radar and telemetry back, and a network of stations keeps constant watch on the health of all her systems. The launcher sending back radar and telemetry to the Earth, the ground stations picking up the signal. Telemetry is launch vehicle data.
Le pilotage est calme.
Information on 1,500, roughly 1,500 parameters is collected, transmitted back to the ground stations every second. And they record all the launcher's functions and vital signs throughout the launch. You see the list of the ground stations. Galileo is behind us here in Kourou. The point of light that's moving represents the launcher's trajectory. Natal
Acquisition de la télémesure lanceur par la station de Natal au Brésil.
Tracking station over the border in our neighbor Brazil. The station run by the Brazilian Defense Department, running it for the CNES in an agreement with ISA. It sees the lower stage burnout and separation. And what do the ground stations like Natal do?
La trajectoire est nominale, il reste moins d'1 minute de propulsion de l'étage principal cryotechnique.
Very important, get immediate data on the spacecraft. Some data are analyzed in real time. Other data are studied after the flight to learn how the vehicle performed on its mission. A complete analysis is carried out about a week after each launch. So you can imagine the enormous archives this gives Arianespace, a wealth of technical information going back to the very first launch of Ariane 1, which was on Christmas Eve, 1979. We're waiting now for confirmation of extinction of the lower stage. You'll see on the left the nozzle will turn off. There it is, shutting down. And awaiting now separation of the lower stage.
Fin de propulsion de l'étage principal cryotechnique.
And ignition of the upper stage.
Et séparation de l'EPC.
These three commands, coming right on time, given by the onboard computer in about 13
Allumage
seconds.
de l'étage supérieur cryotechnique.
The lower stage falling away into the Atlantic. You see that thanks to our onboard camera. It'll fall off the Gulf of Guinea. So we're now into the third and final powered flight phase. The single upper stage engine will burn until plus 25 minutes,
est nominale.
or 16 minutes roughly. The job of the upper stage, is to take the satellites to their injection point, to position them for separation, and then release them. That is its propulsion role.
Tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
But she has a second role, and that comes during Ariane 5's ballistics phase, as they call it. That comes later in the flight, and we'll have more on that coming up. Tonight, Arianespace flight number 239,
La trajectoire est parfaitement nominale.
Intelsat 37e and BSAT 4A, a standard double launch, 2 communication satellites. But throughout the long history of the Ariane launcher, and with the addition of Soyuz and Vega in the recent years, Arianespace has launched for all types of missions and all types of orbits. We have another film, first of a series of films coming up for you now.
Propulsion nominale de l'étage supérieur cryotechnique et pilotage calme.
The fifth Ariane flight of this year will embark in its lower position BSAT 4A. This satellite has been designed and built by SSL for the Japanese leading broadcasting satellite operator BSAT. SSL is also our direct interface for the launch services, as BSAT 4A is being orbited as a part of a turnkey contract between BSAT and SSL. Arianespace has launched all BSAT satellites since the creation of this Japanese operator, reflecting the exceptional confidence of BSAT on our launch services, what makes us very proud and honored. BSAT 4A is based on the highly reliable and well-proven 1300 bus of the Space System LORAD. It will be the 64th satellite of this manufacturer to be orbited by Arianespace, and there are 3 more in our backlog. We would like to thank BSAT and SSL for the confidence in Arianespace. All the best for your LEOP, and see you soon for a future launch campaign.
We mentioned that there are 2 different propulsion systems on Ariane 5. Cryogenics, that's very cold fuel, as used in the main stage, more efficient than solid propellant, which is used in the boosters. Basically, solids are for getting us off the ground, away from the pull of the Earth. The key parameter for the main stage is kinetic energy, or acquiring speed. Once out of the atmosphere, there's no more drag on the vehicle, and we can focus on thrust. Cryogenics, on the other hand, are for more precision orienting of the vehicle, and of course they also allow a stage to be reignited, but that's in the other version of Ariane, the one that's not being used tonight. One advantage of storable fuel is that it doesn't evaporate like the cryogenic fuel does. Storable propellant also cheaper. So you see, performance, security, and cost dictate which system is used. Soyuz works on kerosene and liquid oxygen, sort of semi-cryogenic, if you will. The Russians and the Americans have mastered this system, but the Europeans prefer cryogenics. Intelsat arrived here in French Guiana on August 2nd, went right to the satellite preparation buildings for its checks. BSAT arrived on August 4th. We saw a bit film on BSAT. Now a first look at Intelsat 37e.
Intelsat 37e is the 4th satellite of the EPIC family to be launched on Ariane after Intelsat 29e and 33e, both launched last year, and Intelsat 32e earlier in 2017. And it is the 59th satellite to be launched for Intelsat by Ariane. After the launch last May of SES-15, a spacecraft in the Boeing 702 SP series, and of VA239 launched in June and belonging to the 702 HP family, we are now launching a 702 MP. This perfectly illustrates the adaptation of the Arianespace family of launch vehicles to the various market needs.
Intelsat 37e, it will provide service to the Atlantic Ocean region for South America, Africa, and Europe, giving our customers more capacity and flexibility for interconnectivity for years to come.
10 minutes left in the upper stage burn. While you were watching the film, we were picked up by our next downrange tracking station, Ascension